Good evening and welcome to the January meeting of the Salem Area Mass Transit District. This evening's meeting will include a safety moment, and then we will have the first reading and public hearing on ordinance number 2019-01, which affects our fare structure. We will have a period for public comment, and then we will have our consent calendar, which includes the minutes of our December 12th board meeting. And then we will have an action item, which includes our adoption of our 2019 legislative agenda. And then we'll have various reports from staff and directors. And with that, I will call the meeting to order and call on Director Thompson to lead us in the pledge.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
And for purpose of attendance, I notice that we have all but one director in attendance today. And I'd like to call on our general manager for our safety moment thought.
Thank you. So the safety topic for the month of January is near misses. And so as we go through the month, we ask everyone to be cautious, especially as they walk through doors or going in and out of elevators or around corners, to be aware of your surroundings so you don't cause any accidents between people and have injury. So one of our focuses, especially for administrative folks, is to be alert to your surroundings to minimize any near-miss accidents as you walk into the house. So same for the board.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? Any announcements? I have one. 226 days and Saturday service starts. So we'll try to keep you updated each month. And with that, we will move on to the first item, which is the first reading and the public hearing on our ordinance. And so I will read this to keep it correct. Shall the board direct the first reading of ordinance number 2019-01 by title and open the public hearing on proposed changes to fares and fare implements. The purpose of the public hearing is to receive citizen testimony regarding proposed changes to the fare categories, prices, and structure for youth fares aged 6 to 18 years of age, as described in the proposed ordinance number 2019-01, pursuant to ORS 198.540 and ORS 267.150. And with that, I'll call on our general manager to introduce the topic.
Thank you. So before we actually receive public testimony, we'll present a staff report from Ted Stonecliffe, Transit Planner 2.
Thank you. President Cribbs and members of the board, tonight we're asking the board to direct the first reading of ordinance 2019-01 by title and collect public comments beginning with this board meeting January 24th and ending on February 28th with our board meeting at that time. This will be regarding proposed changes to the fare structure, fare programs, and fare levels as described in the proposed ordinance as shown in attachment A. As a matter of background, our last fare change for the district occurred in January 2015. And last November 1st in 2018, Cherriots submitted its application to ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation, for formula funds from the statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. These new grant funds will provide for a weekend, extended weekday evening, and holiday service on Cherriots local buses, and Saturday and holiday service on Cherriots regional buses. The STIF funds will also be used to provide a new youth fair, and that's the mainstay of the ordinance that we're considering tonight and really through the next month. This new youth fair category will satisfy a requirement of the STIF program, which states that at least 1% of the funds shall be used to improve transportation for students in grades 9 through 12. Our application that we submitted in November recommended approximately 2% of our STIF formula allocation to go towards this program. A full analysis of the fair change decision-making process is included in attachment C in our fares analysis report. The full ordinance is in attachment A, and the Oregon statutes governing the fare changes are provided as attachment B. In table 1 in your memo, we have the proposed youth fares listed. You can also notice that the full fare structure and the table that is included in the fare ordinance proposed is up on the screen here. At the far right, we have the new youth fares. So at the top, we have Cherriots Local with one ride changing, proposed to change from 80 cents to 50 cents. And the day pass for this new youth fare would be $1, down from $1.50. The 30-day youth pass would be $10, down from $22.50. And the annual pass for youth would be $120, roughly, well, it is 12 times the price for the 30-day pass, and that's down from $270, which is the reduced fare. The summer youth pass is proposed to be discontinued, and that's because of the high cost of producing the pass and the low usage. Also, the purpose of that summer youth pass was to get students to ride during the summer, and our new program would actually be cheaper than the current $40 price for that fare product. For Cherriots Regional Services, that's the next section down on the screen at the top. Our single fare would go down from $1.50 to $1, and the day pass would go down to $2 from $3. And finally, the month pass would be $20 instead of $30. All of the other fares are proposed not to change at this time. A public notice of the fare ordinance proposal is provided in attachment D. That is required to be published for any ordinance change 4 to 10 days before the first reading of the fare ordinance. Our public notice was published in the Statesman Journal newspaper this past Friday on January 18th, and on the Cherriots website, cherriots.org, in both Spanish and English on January 17th, with links to the board reports in the agenda packets for our January 14th board work session and January 24th board meeting and public hearing. There will also be an article in the February issue of the Cherriots e-newsletter, which is distributed to everyone on the Cherriots marketing email list. The board will consider citizens' testimony during the public hearing and in writing before adopting the new fare ordinance during the period starting today until the second reading of ordinance number 2019-01 at the public hearing on February 28th. And written comments may be sent by email to board@cherriots.org and must be received by 12 o'clock noon on February 28th to be considered. Finally, the effective date for these changes is proposed to be July 1st of this year, 2019. Next, the financial impact of these changes. Based on our 2016 rider survey, where we saw about 20% of our Cherriots local riders ages 6 to 18, the revenue loss to the district to implement the youth fares as proposed is estimated at approximately $136,813 per year. And for Cherriots Regional, we had 8.8% of riders ages 6 to 18 in the survey, and that would imply an annual revenue loss of $2,242 for Cherriots Regional. Finally, staff recommends that the board direct the first reading of Ordinance 2019-01 by title and receive citizen testimony regarding proposed changes to the fare structure, rates, and effective date for transportation services from the January 24, 2019 board meeting to the February 28, 2019 board meeting pursuant to our state statutes. And I can answer any questions that you have at this time.
Okay. Are there any questions? Yes, Director Bush.
Sorry. I was wondering, it mentioned that people can send comments via email to our website. Is it okay for people to write letters to our physical address?
Yes, of course, people can write physical letters and send them to our administrative offices.
And that's what's the address?
The address is 555 Court Street Northeast, Suite 5230, Salem, Oregon 97301.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Are we ready for a motion? Director Lincoln?
I move that the board direct the first reading of ordinance number 2019-01 by title and receive citizen testimony regarding proposed changes to the fare structure, rates, and effective date for transportation services from the January 24th, 2019 board meeting to the February 28th, 2019 board meeting pursuant to ORS 198.540 and ORS 267.150.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2019-01 by title, ordinance number 2019-1, repealing ordinance number 2014-02, establishing Salem Area Mass Transit District fare categories and rates and establishing an effective date. And with that, we will open the public hearing. And I will first note that we have received written testimony from Randy Morgan, and that will be put into the file. And that is part of the testimony on this issue. And then I will call on, we have two people signed up, and Tahisha, is it Tahisha? Okay, we'll call on you first, and if you will please, when you step up, state your name for the record and your address.
We don't do addresses.
My name is Tashi Weinstein Polson. I am a student at Chemeketa Community College. I'm here to, I know this, I talked with Linda earlier, and I know the school and you have to work together, but I was hoping if you could somehow add a student fare for college students attending Chemeketa, as well as Willamette University and other schools here. Fare is pretty expensive, and a lot of us usually have to pretty much either worry about whether or not we're going to be able to pay for our books or be able to buy food. That also includes whether or not we have to worry about for the the buses. And so if you could, I know you have a youth fair for people in the K through 12. I was hoping you could do that for post-secondary students. Eugene had something like that, as well as Portland. I hope that the board would try to work with schools like Chemeketa Community College in trying to get some kind of fare, reduced fare for students. So.
Okay, we appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions? I might state that the programs in Eugene and also in Portland are between the school and the transit district, and the school basically pays for the discounted fares, and so that's why they have those programs. And we are going to be working with Chemeketa to see if there's something like that can be possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And the next person on our list is Lloyd Chapman.
Lloyd Chapman, I live at 1240 Hillendale Drive, southeast in Salem. It's good to see so many familiar faces up there. Over the last couple of years, I have worked with Salem for Refugees and been really aware of how difficult it is for low-income folks to be able to meet all their expenses, one of which is the buses. I'm not really here to ask you to do anything, because what this district, I think, really needs is expanded service to entice more riders, to get particularly choice riders, so that there's more of an ability to fund those for whom this is a huge expense. I also want to express my appreciation to Cherriots for the program that we have with them, and Salem for Refugees has to help subsidize 30-day passes to refugee adults, and it is a great benefit. We have a new family coming in next 2 weeks, I think, that will have, I think, probably 5 adult members who are over 18, and that will be another real hardship, because would be if they had to pay full fare. So as you move ahead with this, I hope you will consider whatever opportunities there are to maybe it's not a half fare kind of a program, maybe it's something less than that might be able to be implemented sooner than 2 years away, because I really think there are a lot of people in need for whom a lower cost service would be a great benefit. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions? I might just note here that we struggled with this fare, and
No
we
doubt.
looked at the reduced fare for low-income adults, and we found that it would have taken such a big bite out of our budget that it would have reduced the service levels, and so we traded off, and we felt it was better to put the service levels out there than for these people so they can get to and from jobs, than to reduce the service levels and give the lower fare. So that was our trade-off, and we hope in the future we'll have more resources so we'll be able to look at that again and maybe not wait 2 years to make it happen. So thank you for your comments. Any other questions? Oh, yes, Director Lincoln?
Well, do the refugees mostly qualify for a reduced fare most of the time, just because of low income?
No,
There is none.
there's not.
It's simply that we get, Salem for Refugees subsidizes passes, and Chariot subsidizes them to some extent, so as a nonprofit, so that we sell them to the refugees for a lower price.
They don't fall into the Medicaid category.
No.
Medicaid,
I mean,
that's-
initially there was a Willamette Valley Health Group coordinating council would give out free passes, monthly passes to refugees, and that program is no longer available. So there are a number of resources we try to access to help them with transportation or with whatever
services they need.
Director Kelly?
And I think one of the other things that you were talking about is our travel trainers work with the refugees to help them learn where to go and where to get around and things like that.
Yes, been very helpful. Thank you.
So it's not a perfect world, as you know. This is what Saturday service went away 10 years ago. I think it was 2009. 10 years ago this month, yes, because we had the vote to take it away in December. So hopefully things will get better. And if we have ridership, we can do more things. But at this point, one of the things you might want to do is to let other people know that you can help the refugees with subsidizing the bus passes by some fundraising. I know that Salem for Refugees does that, but if you make it known to some people, I think that that would be helpful. I didn't realize you were doing that. I will let my church parishioners know because we've worked with some of the families too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much. It's always good to have you come back.
See you. Good to be here.
There were a few people that came in after we started this hearing. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? If not, we will close.
No, not close it, no, we're continuing.
We will continue it, and we will reopen it for further discussion at our next meeting on February 28th.
I think you want to keep the public hearing open.
It's, well, it's still
Rather
open,
than-
but we will reconvene it, or,
Well, but you're going to continue to receive
yes,
testimony.
yes, that's true. You can send in testimony anytime by U.S. postage or by email. You can communicate with us, and if you need an address, you can see me or somebody else at the end of the meeting, or look us up in the phone book.
So as we receive that, we will collect all the public input between now and the next board meeting and provide that to you as part of the closing piece of the public hearing at the next board meeting.
So we are just extending it now, and the next portion of this hearing will be on Thursday, February 28th in this room. And we'll move on to our next portion, which is public comment, and we have 2 people signed up for public comment. Okay. Ms. Polson? And these are limited to 3 minutes, and
And you don't have to give your address.
Okay, my name is Ms. Polson. I am coming here to support my daughter. My comment is on the lack of connectivity between regional services and the CAT or the young in terms of timing on schedules. And we encountered this when we had to send her to Clackamas Community College. That turns into an all-day thing to coordinate between the 10X or 20X and the CAT bus to Oregon City to get to TriMet. It is potentially a good route if the 2 services would coordinate approximately 8 minutes. And also the 10X is notoriously leaves early, and we have timed it numerous times. So in order to make it a pleasant experience for riders, and which I have been one, I ask that you reconsider the way your drivers coordinate with each other, because for a rider, it is a notoriously stressful and irritating experience. So if you want to increase ridership, you have to remember that riders like myself do not like to stand out in the rain in front of the Amtrak because there's no shelter, nor do we like to stand out at run out and chasing after buses that are leaving early. And we have it documented on my camera numerous times. So that is for your consideration as a board that plans, routes, and coordinates. I love the people at CAT. She is wonderful. I love Yamhill Transit. Cherriots is another beast. But if you want to find wonderful riders, take the Yamhill. Those guys, the riders are awesome. They are super. Okay, that's my comment.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? I know we are working with CATS up in Canby, trying to work out a schedule thing. In fact, we've had our two boards have met, and it's all part of this is improving transportation connections. When I used to go to college, that's decades ago, there used to be a through service that ran all the way from Salem to Portland, and you didn't have to transfer. And we're looking at maybe that's a possibility as far as Oregon City. Thank you. And the next person to sign up is Leslie. Oh, you switched? Okay. And you're the other? Yeah, I'm the other. Do you want to testify again, or? Yeah. Okay.
Chishiko Weinstein Polson's my name. I take the bus pretty much every single day, and I've noticed that the buses leave early. Usually when a bus gets to a stop, they will leave about a minute early than scheduled. Oftentimes, when they do get to a stop, many of them will actually stay less than 30 seconds. I have actually used a stopwatch on my phone, and the longest I've ever seen a bus stay at a stop, especially a transit center, is 38 seconds. It's really dark in a lot of the bus stops, and there are no lights. I go to school at Chemeketa Community College, and our bay area has pretty much no shuttles. There is one little spot that people can stay in a shuttle, or not a shuttle, but a shelter area. The problem is that the buses don't stay long enough from somebody who is staying in the shelter to walk over to the buses, because there are no shelters at the bus stop at Chemeketa. And then there was a new bay that was called Bay E that they just put right next to the apartments where I live, and it's right next to a little tree park area. It's really hard to see at night, and that area has a huge crime rate, so it makes it very dangerous for someone like me to actually be staying there at night, and the bus drivers often don't see us. Another problem is that bus drivers will pass us. They will be going too fast, and they'll pass us, and then they won't stop. And then we have to wait 15, 20 minutes or 30 minutes out in the cold and the rain, because a lot of places don't have shelters for a bus that we should have been able to get on, but the bus driver didn't stop. Another thing that I've also noticed is that a lot of times bus drivers won't coordinate with each other, and so it makes it really difficult for somebody who is trying to get on a connector bus, whether it's taking the 13, the 17, or something. A lot of times there'll be buses that might be late, so you might be getting on a bus that's supposed to get at like somewhere at 18:45 or 6:45, and it wasn't able to get there in time to be able to catch the buses. So if there was some kind of coordination, that would be really, really nice. But I would really love it if the bus driver would actually stay a lot longer at transit centers, not leave early, stay a lot longer than 30 seconds. That would be really nice for a lot of riders. I've also noticed that people have started doing dangerous things in order to get onto the buses. I've seen people jump in front of buses in order to be able to get the bus driver to stop. I've seen people bang on buses in order to get people to stop, to get the bus driver to stop. It's becoming really dangerous. I've also injured myself trying to get to the bus, because I know the buses are notorious for leaving early, and so it's becoming a really dangerous experience for me to actually ride the Chariot, as well as other riders, because we have to do dangerous drinks in order to get the bus driver's attention. So, do you have any questions?
Well,
No.
thank you. We appreciate that, and somebody will look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify at this time before we close the public comment period? Yes, sir?
My name's Mark Kavanaugh. live in just down D Street, just north of downtown. And I'm a transit fan, and I like Cherriots and stuff like that. But my only comment is the website for service notices, if there's urgent reroutes, it's kind of buried on the website. I signed up for text messaging, but the service notice is like buried at the bottom of the page, and you have to click on it to do it. Most transit websites usually have service notices right on top for urgent reroutes. It's just a little comment.
Okay, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Haven't seen you for a long time.
Yes, I have.
So any other persons, any other people that would like to comment? Then we will close the public comment period and move on to the consent calendar. And do we have a motion?
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we'll move on to our first action item, which is adoption of the 2019 legislative agenda. I'll call on our general manager to introduce that.
So as you know, the board annually adopts a legislative agenda that directs our legislative activities, and we use this as a guide when responding to legislative matters and as a communication tool with legislators and other interested parties. So we've developed both the federal and the state legislative agenda in conjunction with CFM Strategic Communications, our legislative consultants, and they're attached as attachments A and B in your packet. We did review this with you at the work session, and you also will see at your desks the full packet, the folder there with the full packet, what we do give to our legislative representatives when we do meet with them. But what we'd like to do now is I'll review the federal legislative agenda, and then we'll turn it over to Dale Penn from CFM, who will walk us through the state legislative agenda. So at the federal level, our major legislative priorities are the grant requests that we submit through our federal programs, and we'll be asking approval of 3 projects for submittal of the grant season, which will start another month or so with the federal 5339 discretionary grant programs. So the first project is for 5 CNG replacement buses. Well, as you know, we've just received 12 new buses. There's another 8 on order, and there's another 9 that we'll be bringing to you in another month or so for approval. When all of those are in, there'll be 5 compressed natural gas buses left to be replaced that are past useful life. So this is this project application will be to replace those 5 remaining compressed natural gas buses. The other is money in an application for regional transit center construction. As you know, in February's work session, we'll be discussing South Salem Transit Center and what's next as a result of the current situation. So based on that discussion, we'll form the meat of the grant application, but we wanted to get at least on the legislative agenda that we will be applying for transit center projects. And then the last is the Intelligent Transportation System project. Now, as you know, we're shortly about to release the CAD AVL RFP, which has an array of ITS items, but one item that it does not have is signal green light extension. And so there's a request for $500,000 for that, and that's a project we'll work with the city to install green light extensions, which will allow, as our buses approach intersections, to hold the light green longer to allow us to get through the intersection. And there's a whole array of technology that's required to make that happen. So that will be our third project. In addition to the grant applications, we have 2 policy issues on our legislative agenda. The first one is for funding of the bus and bus facility program under 2 programs. First is the infrastructure package. And so the district supports the $2.85 billion funding increase in the bus and bus facility program. This funding request would simply fill the gap in funds diverted from the program for the period 2013 to 2020 that was removed from other transportation reauthorization packages. And the funding would create approximately 102,000 jobs nationwide and produce more than 14,000 domestically manufactured buses. And so that 2.85 would go into both the bus and bus facility discretionary pot and the formula pot. We're not making a recommendation how that should be split, but we are asking for that 2.85 billion, which really just brings us back to where we should have been if the programs weren't reduced over the other transportation reauthorization. And then the FY 2020 THUD, or the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Bill. While the program in fiscal year 18 and 19 was significant for transit, we strongly support $550 million in additional investments for the bus and bus facility program in the FY20 appropriations bill. Funding cuts continue to steadily erode the state of good repair of the nation's bus fleets and supporting facilities. Between 2009 and 2016, the number of transit buses operating past their useful life increased by 40%, which also impacted us. And the number of buses operating with more than 15 years increased by 92%. At the same time, total bus fleets contracted by 15%, highlighting the impact of budget cuts transit systems throughout the country. Currently, there's, with the shutdown, we're not sure what's happening, but as soon as the shutdown's over, action on both of these will move forward, so we want to be able to extend our position on that. And then the last item under policy is to extend and make permanent the alternative fuel credit. You know, this has been a program that expires pretty much every year, and then Congress extends it and makes it retroactive, so there is no net loss to agencies who draw on this credit, but we're asking for it to be made permanent as well as extending it. We also had this, if you recall, on previous agendas, along with the commuter tax benefit, which we were able to finally make permanent, but now we're continuing the work on the alternate fuel credit. And just so you're aware, that's about $170,000 impact to the district that we're able to draw that fuels tax credit from the federal government. So that's the federal legislative agenda. So our 3 bus and bus facility grant projects, as well as policy issues. And so now I'll turn over to Dale Penn, who will walk us through the state legislative agenda.
Again, my name is Dale Penn, and I am the State Affairs Lead for CFM, and we have been your contract lobbyists, I think, for about 7 years, 8 years now, maybe longer than that. And so I want to just quickly go through the agenda that I have in front of me. Just talk about our state affairs team, just very briefly, reintroduce you to those individuals. Talk about, just mention the state and federal services we provide. Talk about our legislative priorities. Discuss the election results, and talk about the 2019 Oregon legislative session, which, as many of you know, just started this week officially. So that's your state affairs team. Oh, I apologize. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So again, Dale Penn, CFM. So that's your state affairs team right there for CFM. Myself, Tess Milio, and Zach Reeves. All of us work on a variety of issues. You have 3 of us in the building there at all times. During session, we are in the building as soon as they open the doors, and we're often there well past if they shut the place down. So during session, it is a fun time in the Capitol. There's a lot going on. I enjoy it. I've always enjoyed that aspect of the job. So you've got, like I said, 3 people in the building representing your interests. What we do for Cherriots. So besides legislative and regulatory monitoring, when we talk about legislative work, we're talking about, for an example, House Bill 2017 from the 2017 session, tracking that piece of legislation, testifying, participating in the development of policy. And then with that same piece of legislation during the interim, or when the, outside of the period when the legislature meets, we worked with Alan on the regulatory side of it, making sure that the rules were drafted properly, the program was developed with ODOT and other stakeholders appropriately. And strategic analysis, just monitoring big issues in the building and outside of the building and how we can position ourselves appropriately. Insider perspective, we're boots on the ground in the Capitol. We hear things and are aware of things before they're general news, and so trying to make sure we communicate that appropriately and quickly. And just legislative guidance, just making sure if we have pieces of legislation that they're moving through the system in a quick and efficient manner, or stopping legislation we don't like. So let's talk for a second about the Oregon election results. With the most recent election in November, Oregon is bluer than ever. We have a double supermajority. It's been a while since we've had that in the building. That means that 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate are one party, meaning that they have, 3/5. They have the ability to do quite a bit of unique things in the building, one of which, of course, is raise taxes without the minority party. So we have 38 House members who are Democrats, 22 who are Republicans. In the Senate, we have 18 Democrats and 12 Republicans. The House seat has 2 additional seats above the supermajority requirement. That will lead to some very interesting bill votes. The last time we had such a situation, I believe, was back in 2009. We had 15 votes that were 36-18 votes. And we had some pretty interesting activities by the minority party at that time. There is a quorum requirement in the Senate of 2/3. So we need 40 House members and 20 Senate members on the floor at any time to do anything for a quorum. And so one action that the minority party has at their disposal is to leave the building or deny a quorum, and that can shut down the building pretty quickly. So there are going to be some interesting conversations because of that supermajority in both chambers. Governor Brown easily won re-election this last year, and now sits on the beginning of a 4-year term, where she has announced that she has some pretty aggressive policies around carbon reduction, around raising taxes for schools, and a few other issues we'll talk about just really briefly. So the 2019 Oregon legislative session, the supermajorities create an interesting opportunity to have a cap and trade, cap and invest, whatever you would like to call it, but effectively a carbon cap discussion. The legislation hasn't been released yet. It is something we are going to be monitoring very closely because it can have a direct and fairly drastic impact on the transportation sector. It could potentially have a pretty big impact on gas prices. So as that affects your bottom line, it's something we want to make sure we track very closely. The other big issues, of course, revenue reform or education funding. The legislature, following the very successful 2017 transportation package process, did something similar, created another committee called the Committee for Student Success, and they traveled around the state asking the same basic kind of questions that the Transportation Committee asked about what does the state need to develop or create the kind of education system that our kids desperately need. And then they will use that information to guide their request for substantial increases in revenue. And so the GRB, which is the governor's recommended budget, called for $2 billion in additional funds to meet those requirements from the Student Success Committee. We could see a $2 billion tax package. It could be higher, it could be lower. The Senate and the House will have to come to agreement on that. And so that is going to take up a good chunk of the early part of our session, is figuring that out. Property tax changes. We could see conversations around property taxes. There are quite a few interested individuals and entities who would like to see some changes. Oregon has a very convoluted property tax system because of a couple ballot measures that we had a few years ago. And so there are stakeholders on both sides urging the legislature to take that up. I don't know if that's something that they will have the bandwidth to do this session, but there will be very interested and powerful stakeholders pushing those ideas forward. Pay equity, paid family leave, sexual harassment, workplace environment, culture, all of these things are going to be huge issues that the legislature and stakeholders will need to take up this year. And of course, affordable and equitable housing. One other issue that's not up there that I wanted to flag is campaign finance. Oregon is one of a few states, maybe only the last one, that allows you to contribute unlimited amounts of dollars to campaigns. And I think that's something the governor has indicated towards the tail end of her campaign that she was interested in tackling next year, at least having a conversation about it. So that would involve a constitutional change and of course will get referred to the ballot most likely in 2020 if there's any movement on that. So big issues ahead. Any questions on some of the bigger concepts in the 2019 session? So this is just a slide by the numbers, interesting facts and whatnot. So we have January 22nd was this Tuesday. That was the first day of session. We are constitutionally limited to 160 days for session. We can, of course, get out of there early, which I think a lot of legislators and lobbyists and stakeholders, when it gets to late May, early June, everyone would really love that. But they'd have to pass a budget in order to do that. The only requirement for the legislature constitutionally is to pass a budget. All the other stuff is ancillary to their constitutional requirement. So we have 160 days. That brings us right up to June 30th. The first stack of pre-session filed bills was 1,470, maybe 1,467, something around there. We had about 160 drop yesterday, and we will see additional bills drop throughout the first couple months of session, bringing our total probably up to 2,500 to 3,000, maybe more. So that's quite a bit of bills impacting a wide range of interests. We track, as part of our role with Salem Kaiser Transit, we track those bills. And at any given time, we track anywhere from a couple dozen to 100 plus for you guys. Some of them only impact Salem Kaiser Transit or Cherriots very minor levels, but some have direct and massive impacts on you. And we will make determinations with Alan and your board to see if we need to testify or actively lobby those type of issues. The quorum, as I mentioned before, 20 senators, 40 reps. We have 2 brand new senators, 9 brand new representatives, but we have quite a few what I call red shirt freshmen senators or representatives who have entered the legislature since the last general election, either by appointment process or others. And so we've got maybe about another maybe 10 other legislators that meet that bill. So every cycle we have an uphill battle of re-education with lawmakers, and that's a huge component of what we do is we educate lawmakers on Cherriots, on your programs and services you provide, and because of the transportation package, we will need to make sure that we educate new legislators and existing ones that 2 years ago you passed a massive, fantastic investment for transit, and here are the facts of the matter so that they understand that going forward. So let's talk really quickly about the legislative priorities for Salem Kaiser Transit. As I mentioned a couple times before, I won't spend much more time on this, but House Bill 2017, implementation and monitoring, that's our biggest issue. Legislators last cycle in 2017 understood the dire need in Oregon to invest in transit services, and they passed a statewide payroll tax. The first that we've had for dedicated funding, and that was an amazing investment. We need to make sure that's implemented properly. Any pot of money, no matter what it is always looked at by other stakeholders as a potential fund to sweep. So that is our #1 goal from here on out, is to protect those dollars for transit investments as they were originally mandated to provide. So that involves working with coalition partners, working with other transit agencies, in communities that are impacted by the transit investments, making sure that they know what's going on, when service is going to roll out. Director Krebs, I really appreciated the countdown to Saturday service. That was a huge selling point for lawmakers and for advocates, is that weekend service in Salem, a later evening service in Salem. That was a huge component of our success in the building with the 2017 session. And so that's something we will need to be communicating with legislators about from here until whenever. Senior disabled transit funding. So this is an issue that senior and disabled transit, called the STF fund, is an allocation every year that is partially funded with general fund dollars. It's one of the only, if not the only, pot of general fund dollars that goes to ODOT, meaning the strings are not really attached to how they spend that. They use that with some cigarette tax dollars, ID card dollars, and non-highway gas tax dollars, or the gas tax raised from filling up your lawnmower effectively. They put that all in a pot of money, and they use that for senior and disabled transit funding around the state. Salem-Keizer is a recipient of those. Disproportionately impacts rural communities. The governor's recommended budget included a $10 million reduction in that. I think with the belief that the new transit dollars could be utilized to backfill that. And one of the requirements in 2017 was that the new money needed to go towards new and enhanced service. So part of our role in the Capitol this year is going to be educating lawmakers, reminding them about that provision, that maintenance of effort for transit funding, and see if we can get that funded back in. Because like I said, Salem-Keizer receives a portion of it, TriMet does Lane, but this is used in small rural transit agencies around the state often as match dollars. And so it has a disproportionate impact on those rural communities, and it's not just a dollar for dollar, it's much more of an impact in those areas. Transit governance, the bill that Senator Courtney passed last year, we're going to be monitoring that. We're going to be talking with the governor's office, making sure, tracking any kind of movement on that bill. So far there's been none, and that will be one of our highest priorities to make sure that's implemented appropriately. The Clean Fuels Exchange. So back in 2009, the Oregon legislature passed House Bill 2186, which authorized DEQ to adopt rules to reduce the average carbon intensity of Oregon's transportation fuels by 10% over a 10-year period. That would allow credits to be generated by entities that were able to get underneath that allowance. And so what we're trying to do is look at that program and to figure out ways, if there are any, to convert existing and expired credits that Salem-Keizer currently has and convert them into these clean fuels exchange credits and potentially see some revenue from that for Salem-Keizer operations. So those are our major legislative priorities in 2019. The other ones that I'll just mention really quickly are all legislative priorities that are on our second or third tier, making sure that any piece of legislation dealing with electric vehicle investments, we track that and we see how that can benefit the Salem community, Salem-Keizer community. Cap and invest, of course, we're going to be watching that, as I mentioned before. Transit safety, both for the rider and for the driver and for other staff. An important concept to monitor. There are going to be a couple bills related to that this year. TNC legislation. The last time I presented in front of you guys, I started talking about this and I didn't explain what TNC meant. So transportation network companies, Uber and Lyft type entities, making sure that we track legislation just to monitor what's being discussed and if that changes at all, how we provide transit services in the state. And then of course just always monitoring the VW settlement dollars and how those are allocated and if there are barriers or allowances for transit to utilize some of that money in different and unique ways. So that is our 2019 legislative priority list. I am here to take questions or to talk about politics in general, which I love to do, so.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Good.
Guess we don't, so thank you.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much.
Of course, we've had this at our work session, so we're pretty familiar with what's going on.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And do we have a motion to?
I don't know if I have a voice, but I'll try. I move that the board adopt the 2019 legislative agenda.
Been moved and second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and motion carries. We'll move on down the line. We have- So our next item on the agenda is the general manager's report.
Thank you. So I just have a couple items to report. So I just got back from some APTA meetings, actually like 3 hours ago. So I don't have any report on that, but I will put it in my weekly report tomorrow. So share with you the latest and greatest at the federal level and what's happening at the shutdown. Also, as Dale mentioned in his report, the STF funds. So the STF Advisory Committee is meeting next Tuesday to hear grant applications for the STF money for the next biennium. And their work will be to form a recommendation to you for the next month's board meeting to approve those grants. I can tell you there's a lot of grants as compared to previous years, so they will have their work cut out for them to prioritize those projects. Because, so the recommendation from ODOT is to submit a list of applications based on the funding marks, which include the $10 million of the general fund in the governor, it's not in the governor's budget, but have also asked us to prioritize if that money isn't there, which is about 40% of that. So as that trickles down, that's about 40% of Cherriots' share for the biennium. And as you know, we used a lot of that for regional service and use that to leverage federal money. So it will be a good discussion about setting up some recommendations for grants, but also what to recommend to you if the money doesn't come through the legislative session. And then the last item I have, I sent information out to you, but the ODOT's Public Transit Advisory Committee's subcommittee that reviewed the statewide transportation improvement fund applications for the money for new service has done their work and made a recommendation that will go next month to the Public Transit Advisory Committee on packages, and we are one of the 18 applications that are recommending for approval, which once PTAC approves that recommendation, it will go to the Oregon Transportation Commission for final approval, and then once that happens, then the money starts flowing. So that's good. Not all the projects were approved, or all the applications. 2 of them, if you recall, were partially approved. So there was a project and 2 different applications that were not recommended for approval. So we don't expect any surprises based on the ones that are approved, and hopefully OTC will gavel down in April, and then we'll start to see the money, especially for the first 2 quarters from July 1st of 2018 to December 31st. They will release those first 2 quarters, and then we'll start to receive a quarterly payments as they receive the revenue. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. My report is fairly simple this month. I have about 16 hours of various activities regarding transit and other volunteer activities. I did attend the Mid-Willamette Valley COG board meeting, and one of the things that's sort of a tragedy there is that they had their offices flooded the night before we had our meeting due to a plugged downspout in the building, and so there was considerable water damage, and a number of their meetings will be held in this room now because they're kind of cramped for space over there. So, but we had our meeting in December, and most of the items were just normal things. There were some lease renewal on their space and a selection of an auditor for the group, and some other agreements. One of the major things that will affect Salem Kaiser Transit is that they're increasing the dues, and our cost will go up about $81 a year, which is not a significant increase. And they do provide a lot of services for us, and we serve on a number of their committees and boards. It's a good value for the services provided by the council and governments. I also attended the Morningside Neighborhood Association, and one of the things they brought up was the concern about people jaywalking across Commercial Street, and because of where the bus stop is located. And I've had this brought up in other parts of the city, not in my sub-district, but where bus stops are located where there is a right turn lane, and we move the bus stop back maybe a block from the intersection so that it isn't in the right turn lane. But what happens is people wanting to go across the street rather than going down to the signal go directly across the 5-lane street. And there are some of these locations out on Lancaster that I've noted there. And so they were suggesting that maybe we talk to the city and see if there's some way that we could work out where the bus could go to the intersection rather than all the way dropping people in the middle of the block and then they go straight across the block. And the other thing is the city is looking at installing crosswalks to facilitate some of these things. So if we had the bus stop better located, it might save some tax dollars in installing a crosswalk with blinking lights and so forth. So those are basically the things that I did. It was because of the holidays, there were not as many activities this month, and so that's about all I have to report. So I will call on Director Bush to, and we'll just go right down the line.
Okay. Happy New Year. I wasn't ready. I attended the board meeting in December and the work session way back in November. It's a long time ago. The Special Transportation Fund Advisory Committee was canceled for December, I think. Yes. I attended several Kaiser City Council meetings and Chamber of Commerce meetings for both Kaiser, Salem, and Woodburn. A couple of the Woodburn Chamber meetings were at the city of Jervis, and the other one was at the city of Woodburn. So I got to learn about the cities that we help service with our routes. So that was good to get our face in front of other people and have some good conversations there. I attended the swearing in for the Marion County Commissioners. Got to meet the new Commissioner Colin Willis and welcome the other two back to their jobs. I also attended the Commissioner breakfast that they usually have with the Kaiser City Councilors once a month, and I sit in and listen to their conversations so I can stay in the know between county and city. I do some tutoring. I did that for several hours this month. Attended, sat in at the SCATS meeting, and I wanted to say one of the at the Government Affairs Committee meeting in December for Kaiser Chamber, PGE presented on their cap and invest and energy legislation, and they also co-sponsored the new, what's called the cogeneration, is that right? Up at Willow Lake, the new facility that they're starting to build together with several other businesses to help with all of our wastewater treatment and reduce energy and costs. Kaiser is doing some studies. One's called the revitalization study, and another is housing needs analysis. And I'm on the revitalization committee where we're looking at corridors, Cherry and River Road, and how to improve those. And I'm able to provide some transportation information for them in doing that. And then a last note, I want to honor a recent citizen of Kaiser who's passed away, Jerry McGee. He was very informative and important to the beginning of Kaiser. He and his wife helped run the first bus from north to south, and several months ago he gave me the routes for Kaiser, 1978, I think it was. And his service will be February 2nd from 1 to 5 at Kaiser City Center. So, and I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Rogers.
Well, I think in all the time I've been on the board, I've had the slowest month. Right after New Year's, Christmas was over, like everybody went to sleep. And we had some neighborhood associations that didn't meet. And the good news is there's another neighborhood association that is getting put together in the county right next to my neighborhood association in the city. And I've been in contact with them, and we'll be working together so I can keep them informed of what's happening in transit, and also as chair of my neighborhood association, we'll see if we can do projects together to get community spirit, keep things, on a high note as much as possible. There's a Brown Road project coming in next month or so where street lights will be put up, which is very good. I also had a problem with it being dark out there, and twice now the bus almost passed me by, and I waved at him, "Hey, I'm here." And so those lights will be nice. And I guess that's about it.
Thank you. Director Evans?
So, do we have any of those little blue flashers still?
Yes.
Can we get those for those folks? Because we have these little flashers.
I have some already.
Okay. If they can see those, I mean, if you're there at the site, maybe that would help.
Is he turned on?
Yeah. You don't have.
I don't have any.
Yeah. Well, we'll try to get you those.
Is it not? Oh, sorry. I did the board meeting and the work session and an hour of the neighborhood association meeting. I met with one of the executives for Representative Evans at the Capitol, and just talked about overall experience for the upcoming session. I gave the public the Capitol tour for the public policy interns and team, so about 16 of them. I do that on Fridays, and I just happened to be the one that got to give the newbies and some of the experienced ones a tour of the Capitol. I met with County Commissioner, talked about the bridge issue, one of the county commissioners, and also we just briefly talked about the North Block and what's going to happen there, or thoughts that they had about it, he had about it. And I went to a city council meeting, and then I met with West Salem councilor at one of his coffee meetings, and purchased side-by-side lots in Anderson Island as a family retreat. This just closed on Tuesday, so that's going to be a side project that the family has for including the boys in the family, because I can't do it all over the next year or so. So I'm looking forward to that piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Thompson?
Well, it's been, I missed the board meeting last month because of illness. But I did do the work session, and I attended in the last 2 months, I attended 2 SEDCOR meetings. The last one was regarding the legislative agenda, which Dale talked about tonight, and had a very, very good lobbyist that did a really good job of covering basically what Dale covered tonight, and Dale did just as good a job, if not better. Anyway, that was a good. 2 chamber public policy meetings. The last one was the cap and trade that you just talked about, with the same people probably, PGE and Northwest Gas. And that's still, who knows what's going to happen on that kind of a thing. Let's see, what else did I do? I did something else too. Anyway, it's probably not very important.
Anyway, that's pretty much my report.
Thank you. Director Kelly?
The board meeting, the work session, talked to a constituent for a bit, and we didn't have an area commission meeting on transportation, but I spent an hour and a half, something like that, doing an online training, because anyone who's on an ODOT committee has to take a training on safe workplaces. This followed by taking a training on safe church for kids and others, which was more involved because there were 12 segments on that. And as Dale said, the legislative session is taking up some of my time. I think that there are 174 bills to track regarding something on taxes. So everybody who has an idea can put a bill in, so you may have 5 bills with the same sort of subject, but a little bit tweaked and a little bit different. So it's not quite as bad as it could be. The two things that are, and I don't talk for transit over the Capitol, but the two things that are talked about on the property tax is not necessarily totally doing residential, maybe doing some business, or maybe taking it out of the Constitution and putting it into statute so that it can be, it might flow a little bit better. What we've had is we've had a lot of unequal treatment just because somebody's had a house for a long period of time, or it's in a slightly different area of the same city, and it happens for both business and residential properties. And so there's some effort to look at that. And I will give a little plug. Tomorrow I'm going to City Club, and the topic is going to be taxes.
Thank you. Director Lincoln?
I attended the board meeting and the work session also, but the highlight of the last few weeks was a tour of the operations center and the bus maintenance facilities led by David Trimble, and it was fascinating. It was really interesting. Met a lot of hardworking, talented, skilled people, and found out a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know, so really appreciate it. Went to our neighborhood association meeting, and now I'm one of the directors, so add another meeting to my calendar.
That's why I was going from
Works
mine.
that way.
Went to 2 Salem City Club meetings, and it seems like I always run into someone there who wants to talk about buses, and so I spent some time with a constituent at one of those meetings. Attended the SCATS meeting, which was just Tuesday, and also went to hear Senator Merkley at the town hall on, that was Monday.
Yeah, it was.
Met with Steve Dickey for an hour to talk about the SCATS agenda because it's kind of complicated. And I think I'm sort of figuring out where the finances come from and how they figure out how to spend the money, which I can go into. Should I talk about the SCATS thing now? There wasn't a whole lot there that had to do with us in particular, but we did review the Unified Planning Work Program, which is the list of projects that the SCATS staff will work on over the next year, planning projects. And the interesting thing about that is they help do the planning for the county and the 2 cities, but Cherriots does most of our planning in-house. So the money, that SCATS planning money comes from ODOT through SCATS and then to Cherriots. So most of our planning is done in-house, but it's good to see, it's laid out there what the projects that we will be working on if anyone wants to see that. They also, SCATS Policy Committee and staff are trying to prioritize transportation projects for the next funding period, and that doesn't have to do too much with us. Most of the projects that we have on the Regional Transportation System Plan are, we have funding dollars assigned already or committed. So the few dollars that are up for grabs they're trying to figure out way to prioritize that among the various jurisdictions and the various projects. So that will go on for another couple of months. And then they have to finalize the regional transportation system plan in June, I believe it is, the final for the next 4 years. So that's all.
Thank you. Is there anything else that we, yes, Director Evans?
I have one thing. When we passed the consent calendar, we approved the minutes for December 13th, 2018. I'd like to make a motion to amend those minutes and to approve the amended minutes for December 13th. I'm clearly absent from that evening. It was a family Christmas event, and I'm shown as voting in favor of the motions on pages 3, 4, and 5. And Director Kelly has left out, and I'm sure she voted yes on those. So if I could, if there's a second to that motion to amend.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded.
All right.
We need any discussion? Okay.
I'll give you the paperwork.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Yes, Director Kelly.
And I do have one thing that it doesn't require going back and doing business. On Tuesday, I ran into one of our retired drivers, Bill, and it was just really fun. We chatted for a bit, and he was always one of the nicest drivers. And Victor lost a button on his overcoat one time, and Bill saw it pop off. Victor didn't notice it. Bill picked it up, and when I saw him the next time, he said, "I have your husband's coat button if he wants it back." Next time I see him, or next time he sees me, tell him to do it. Anyway, it was just really fun running into Bill.
Oh. That's the type of service we wish all our drivers offered. Any other comments? Just remember, 226 days until Saturday service, and we are adjourned.